Here's the Madison Club. Thank you very much for attending. Some announcements before we get to the program. Here's a collector's item. It's our only printed product of the year. Make sure you get one. It's the WisPolitics-State Affairs Directory of State Officials and Federal Officials. So please make sure you get one. Colin, wherever you are, you can get one from Colin. All right. So we have some special guests in the room. Former Chief Justice Ann Walsh Bradley, wave to us. She's my Indigo connection, and I'll explain that later on. Okay, we have a group from the UW-Madison LaFollette School of Public Affairs. Where are you? And we have a group from the Consulate of the People's Republic of China in Chicago, along with Consul General Wang. And we have something special. If you went through the line, you'll notice there was a cheese selection courtesy of the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin. Every day is Cheese Day in Wisconsin, but today is a special Cheese Day because we have the Dairy Farmers selection. And just as if you don't know, the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin is the marketing and promotion organization for Wisconsin's $53 billion dairy industry. So, representing the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin today is Ben Miller. Ben, say hello to everybody. Get some cheese. You can even take some home, right? Yeah, right? You'll provide little coolers to take it home. All right. I want to thank our sponsors for this Madison Club event series. We're having quite a few here at the beginning of the year, but there's a lot going on. Walmart, WEC Energy Group, the Wisconsin Hospital Association, HBS Wisconsin, American Family Insurance, and Xcel Energy. And this is where you wildly applause for the sponsors. At this time, we will have Governor Tony Evers, who will talk about his State of the State address. But today, we have U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin. Please welcome Senator Baldwin. This is a makeup date for Senator Baldwin and WisPolitics-State Affairs. She was supposed to be here late last year, and then this shutdown happened, and now there's another shutdown. I'm beginning to think that WisPolitics and State Affairs have an influence on this shutdown in Washington. What is going on? Or are you just trying to avoid it?
There's no place I'd rather be than in this room right now. But I want to take that question and note a success, as well as why it is one department of the federal government is in shutdown. The success, in the first year of the Trump presidency, we were not able to pass individual appropriation bills funding the agencies, so we were working on a continuing resolution. I sit on the Appropriations Committee, so that's something that really aggravated me, because appropriation bills create guardrails that instruct the administration what you need to spend on each individual activity, and guardrails against some of the overreaches that we have seen out of this administration. And the committee that I'm the ranking Democrat on, the subcommittee, funds the Labor Department, the Education Department, and the Health and Human Services Department. And we were seeing, for example, a proposal by the President to cut biomedical research by 40%, the CDC by 57%, to eliminate the AmeriCorps program. You have a president who wants to eliminate the entire education department, and the list goes on. We were able to construct a bill for this fiscal year that not only fully funded NIH, but increased the funding for biomedical research. We increased the funding for public health. We restored the AmeriCorps program, And we put a lot of guardrails into that bill to prevent things like these massive layoffs. He said you have to maintain staff sufficient to meet your statutory mission. And so when the president signed into law that bill, the bill that I helped construct on February 3rd, I feel like we have a little bit more of a check and a balance than we exercised in the past. But there was one subcommittee bill, the Homeland Security bill, that we could not come to agreement upon. Because as we were watching what was happening in our neighboring state of Minnesota, with a surge of 3,000 ICE and other agents outnumbering local police 3-1, and we were watching, with our own eyes, activities that had clearly appeared lawless and nothing like what you would expect of your local police officers who don't wear masks, who have their identification on, their body cameras on in some cases, and have rules of engagement. And so, as that budget was coming before the Senate, we said we're going to have to insist upon guardrails. And there's basically, I don't know how much you want me to get into.
Well, I do want to know what is your position and the Senate Democrats' position on what should the guardrails be, because I think that
they fall into three major categories.
Okay.
One is, and we talked about it, like masks off, body cameras on. But a part of that is also just having some sort of identification. I remember listening to a podcast with the Minneapolis police chief, O'Hara, saying, when my officers approach a vehicle, they say, I am officer so-and-so, I've stopped you because that he saw that wasn't happening. And all the trust that local police officers have with their communities was being compromised by officers, federal officers coming in that weren't, following any of those basic rules of conduct. So the masks off, body cameras on, identification. Stop the roving patrols. I think Americans made it clear when they voted for Donald Trump that they wanted lawless, undocumented immigrants, people who had engaged in violent crime or threats to their community. They wanted them arrested and deported. But the idea of just roving gangs that can do racial profiling and pick up people with an accent or who look like they're not their idea of Americans is outrageous. And so we believe that they should have warrants before they can bust into a home. And we also believe in that area that there should be places that, let's call them sacred or at least special, where they can't just lurk. Schools, churches, health clinics, election sites. And so we're trying to build that into the law. And then the last is just the code of conduct, the code of rules of engagement, and independent investigations when there is an instance like the killing of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, who, by the way, grew up in Wisconsin, that they need local and state independent access to evidence, which the federal law enforcement was denying to local. So those are basically our demands.
what are the chances of success?
The last I heard, I need my Republican colleagues in the Senate to engage. So far, they have just said this is a negotiation with the White House. They need to understand that they're the that we are the legislative branch, and that this is a bill that we crafted. I hope my colleagues heard as much from their constituents as I did. In the days since Alex Preddy was killed, my office has received well in excess of 50,000 phone calls. That is more than we have ever gotten in a month-long period of time. And I think if people hear that, they should do the right thing.
Okay, so DHS's own staff, I think, back up some of what you're talking about. There's a minority of folks that are being arrested, held, who are actually have records or pending charges, according to stats I see. So how would you, I guess, get them to focus on what I guess everybody thought they were going to do?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, what the figure I heard most recently in a published report was 14% of the people they have apprehended and detained have violent criminal records. And that's not what the people of Wisconsin or the people of America voted for when they were saying, yes, get rid of the worst, or whatever phrases he was using at the time of his campaign. I think getting rid of the roving patrols and requiring warrants will absolutely get them to target their attention. I mean, they're going to be looking at criminal records, matching them with U.S. citizenship status, and they should come up with their list of the worst, and in a pinpoint way go after them. But doing a dragnet through American residential neighborhoods is not the way to do that. Okay,
so I mean, the pushback from Trump supporters is, well, Democrats are trying to, defund ICE. They're trying to, get rid of, hurt law enforcement. So, are you trying to defund ICE, or are you trying to reform ICE?
We are trying to make sure that any federal law enforcement agent is subject to the very same common sense rules that you would expect of your local police, and that are in effect. In fact, one of the proposals that we gave in terms of what type of legislative language, was borrowed from Florida, not a blue state. But the idea, there's just no reason why we shouldn't have these common sense rules. I think I lost part of your question in that.
No, that's okay. I mean, there's a political danger here for Democrats. Yeah. Is this you're defunding ICE, or you want to reform ICE?
We have immigration laws, and we have to have agencies that enforce those laws. I will say those laws are broken, and it's up to Congress to do major reforms or even targeted reforms. I mean, we could do agricultural visa reforms, which would be very important to protecting farm workers in our state who are working very hard every day. But writ large, we need to do immigration reform. That said, we have immigration laws. They need to be enforced, and we need an agency that is enforcing those laws but not becoming lawless. And I would say there's a lot of people looking at what we saw in Minnesota, and again, I want to just reiterate just the scale of this. They had 3 times more ICE agents in the Twin Cities than they have local law enforcement. And they were roving the streets, residential neighborhoods, in masks with heavy armaments and no identification. Driving cars, SUVs that had no identification. How would you even know if you were pulled off the street? They weren't just being kidnapped by bounty hunters. I mean, that's not America. And we've got to rein them in.
Okay, so the Wisconsin ag industry depends upon immigrant labor. I mean, the building industry depends upon immigrant labor. Should businesses in Wisconsin be on guard and worried that that's going to happen here too?
Well, if President Trump and his administration stuck by his word and said we're going to go after violent criminals who are here undocumented, and you have employers who are hiring people who do not have violent criminal records, they should be able to have peace of mind. But that's not what's happening. And I'm hearing a lot from the communities who actually supported him, that that's not what we intended when we cast that vote.
Okay, so you must have PTSD from 2025, because it's like every morning you woke up, there was probably something that they were like, what?
Flood the zone.
What?
Flood the zone.
Okay, so you
I'm a
mentioned...
strong swimmer.
Okay. Well, you have to be. So you talked about tariffs. Okay, that's another one. There's this pending Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court decision that could upend things. But you said you had a roundtable on this yesterday in Oak Cliff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what are people telling you about how tariffs are affecting their livelihood or their businesses?
Yeah. Well, this was a roundtable with some Main Street retailers. There were some small businesses that weren't represented at the table. We didn't have any restaurateurs or other, but these, and there was a combination of those who were recently started their businesses and those who had been on the scene for nearly 20 years, and they're saying this is the worst time that they've seen. And they're very concerned about their colleagues closing shop, or considering doing that themselves, and wondering about the domino effect if they should. But tariffs affect the products that they sell. So if they are sourcing some of their products from overseas, or some of their materials, if they are using materials to make things, they're seeing a lot of increase there. And again, depending on where their source is. One of the people who is at the table sells children's clothing that is ethically sourced. So she's looking both at the materials, the fabrics, to make sure that they're healthy for children, but also that the places where they are made are paying their workers a living wage, etc. And she said she has seen her prices of the outfits, the clothing that she's bringing in increase dramatically, but she's also seen some say, we are no longer going to do business in the United States. Brand names that just, it's not worth doing business with the United States because of all the hoops and all the tariffs. So they're seeing I guess that's the upstream. And then they're seeing the downstream. And I asked several about the ones who have been around in business for a long time, so they have data year after year. They're talking about, some say the same number of customers, but each purchase is a little bit less than it was last year and the year before, because our customers are feeling so squeezed. And others were saying that they've seen just a drop-off overall in who's coming into their stores. And the feeling is, and of course it's anecdotal more than it is evidence-based, but the feeling is that we sell luxuries that you can do without, and therefore some are just deciding to do without. So there's a lot of, and their margins are, if they want to eat some of the tariffs and not pass it on to the customers, then their margin is even thinner. And it affects whether they can have 1 employee or 10 employees.
Okay. So is your major beef about tariffs that there are tariffs, or how they were enacted under so-called emergency powers?
So I think there's a right way to do tariffs and a wrong way to do tariffs. And I think this is the wrong way. I am not somebody who says, no, never use tariffs. A lot of the tariffs we have are based on thorough investigations of whether there's dumping going on. And so steel and aluminum and other things, those tariffs were enacted based on research and evidence that the International Trade Commission reviewed and said, oh, there is dumping, there is cheating. We've had a major one around shipbuilding recently. And I think it's important to figure out how to bring America back into the fold of shipbuilding. But the complaint, I think, that I heard from them and from so many others is, first of all, the volatility and the uncertainty of it. Businesses need to plan, whether you're a huge business or a small business. You need to be able to think about what we need to purchase for the next year, how much we pay our employees, all these things you need to plan. And if there's something that you can't predict because one day it's 0 and the next it's 100%, you can't plan. I had several business owners say the uncertainty is a tariff in and of itself. And so that's part of the complaint. And then, you were talking about, well, first of all, there's a Supreme Court case, as we were just discussing, that is going to look into whether this president has the unilateral authority to levy these tariffs. The underpinning is a declaration of an emergency. That's the underpinning of so many things this president has done without congressional authorization. Sending National Guard, federalized National Guard. There's an emergency. He declares it, he does something. Not everything is an emergency, right? And he threatened just in the last couple of weeks a 100% tariff on Canada, because Canada has an agreement with China to import 49,000 electric vehicles. He didn't go through with it, but that causes ripple effects throughout the economy, the financial markets. And so I think that that's the wrong way.
Okay, so what happens? I don't know how many billions of dollars the U.S. has collected, and I'm not sure what account it is in. But what happens if the Supreme Court says these emergency tariffs are no more? And there are some cracks in the Republican facade, and we saw that in the House. So what happens then?
They're supposed to be refunded, as I understand it.
Okay.
I don't know if the Supreme Court is going to give any clarity. They're looking at the question of whether this president has the authority and whether the underlying declarations of various emergencies are actual emergencies.
And then I think this morning I read that there might be a North American trade agreement without Canada. So how does that work?
Okay,
Maybe we just have to change the geography.
The USMCA was actually agreed to in Trump's first administration. It was one of the few multilateral trade deals that I ever actually supported, because I think they did a good job of making it not a race to the bottom, but something that would lift all participants. We are right at the moment of I think it's the 6-year review. I know I might be getting my years wrong, but it's written into the agreement that all 3 participant countries are supposed to review and recommend changes or assess whether they want to leave. And so I think that we may hear from both of our neighbors threats because what is their leverage against the tariffs?
Yeah, right.
If they don't say something like, well, if you want to slap all these tariffs on us, then maybe we won't be a part of this multilateral agreement. I think in the end, all 3 countries will participate. Right now we're in a period, so there's all these sort of milestones of the review, and we're in a public comment section, so that'll be interesting to see what businesses, industry in America think about it, what proposals for change they have. And then the U.S. Trade Representative will be taking the lead on reviewing those and moving and taking the next steps.
Yeah, there is still a U.S. Trade Representative office, I think.
Jamison Greer,
Yeah.
Ambassador Greer is
Yeah.
still our U.S. Trade Representative.
All right, I want to talk about healthcare. So, however, the big beautiful bill or the big bad bill or however, whatever.
Big ugly bill.
Yeah, whatever. However people term it. There was something in there, on Medicaid and rural hospitals. And I'm connecting the two, and maybe you will not like that I'm connecting the two, but there's a lot of stress on rural hospitals, and then there was actually a fund put in there to help rural hospitals make a transition. And I'm wondering, what are you hearing in your travels about the situation with rural hospitals, which, have a lot of issues, and then this on top of it? Are they going to be able to make it?
Many are on the edge. We probably have about a dozen rural hospitals in Wisconsin that are really facing the risk of either closing at some point in the near future or reducing services significantly, whether that's usually meaning closing a department is losing money, so emergency room, delivery room, or mental health services. And so creating more and more health deserts in our state. So let's call it HR 1, which is otherwise known by Trump as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and many different monikers on the opposition side of what we call it. But HR 1, with its nearly $1 trillion cut to Medicaid over the next decade, has disproportionate impact on rural hospitals. I was at a critical access hospital in Whitehall in Trumpelow County on Tuesday. Their margin is 1%. I was visiting rural hospitals throughout the time we were debating HR 1, and they were talking about how there are years where they just are underwater and looking at ways to stay in business and serve their communities that they're so dedicated to. But when you take $1 trillion out of Medicaid and they're sharing their data that they have disproportionate Medicare and Medicaid, Badger Care, patients getting services, and then people will lose their insurance either because of the cuts to Medicaid or because of the failure to extend the enhanced premium tax credits for people to purchase insurance through the Affordable Care Act. They're looking at a lot more charity care, uninsured care, and that puts them on the precipice. They're expected over the next decade to lose about $150 billion. But this rural transition fund that you're talking about is $50 billion. So 1/3 of what they're projected to lose while they're already on the precipice is covered by what my Republican friends are heralding as, oh, this is the savior. It's not. It will not bridge the gap that we're seeing. Half of that $50 billion is shared equally. The other is a competitive grant program. So now you're getting down from 1/3 to 1/6 is guaranteed. We're going to see some closures, I think, here in Wisconsin because of that. I'm very worried about how those with such thin margins will be able to adapt to having a much higher percentage of patients they see not have insurance. And we also know that the direct consequence of being uninsured is not seeking care at the earliest stages of something going wrong.
So what's the solution?
Well, I can give you the, if I had a magic wand solution, and I can also give you what I think the path forward is in a bipartisan Congress.
Let's go with that.
Okay. So where I see agreement across the aisle right now is on demanding, requiring transparency in the healthcare system, so that we can really get a true picture, lift up the veil, get a true picture of what's going on. There is no reason in America that we should be spending twice as much on healthcare as any other industrialized nation and having lower health outcomes. There just shouldn't be that way. And we see, perhaps the easiest way to explain this is just the lack of transparency in the pharmaceutical industry. So you have pharmacies that invent and then manufacture medications or medical devices. They set the price, and then these groups called PBMs that are becoming more monolithic distribute them or make deals, rebates, discounts. You can get it for this, you can get it for that, meaning that sometimes the people who don't have coverage and are paying out of pocket are the only ones paying that list price. I've asked over and over again, as a sitting senator with the OMB director in front of me, or with the CMS director in front of me, or the Department of Health and Human Services director under Trump 1, Alex Azar, in front of me, and said, follow the dollar, help me follow the dollar. This EpiPen was $100 last year, now it's $200. Tell me where that extra $100 goes. It's complicated, ma'am. Tell that to the mom whose kid has allergies and needs an EpiPen and can't afford $200. You know, that is, and so that complexity and that opaqueness makes it much more difficult for policymakers to make the changes. We need to do that with hospitals. We need to do that with, clinical sites. We need to do that with the pharmaceutical industry. And I think that will lead us to more reforms. In the meantime, I want to see a public option in the Affordable Care Act. We designed it that way, and it didn't make it through. And I want to see Medicare be expanded to cover vision, hearing, and dental. And then I think you can look at things like, okay, maybe we start making people eligible for Medicare at a lower age, or maybe we have a buy-in option or whatever. But I think we want to move in those directions, but we want to do it in a very transparent way so that we can figure out why we spend twice as much with lower and poorer outcomes.
Okay, question from me before we go to the audience for questions. So should we go to war against Iran?
No.
Well, I know specific Iraq because the visions of that have come to me. Anyway.
They're neighbors.
Okay, yeah. Should we?
No.
Okay. Why not? And how to prevent it?
Okay, I want to just do it. It's so interesting because this president has also already bombed Iran. A few weeks ago, he was saying he was going to take action on behalf of the protesters who were protesting the regime in Iran. And now it's because the nuclear negotiations are not reaching a conclusion that they're threatening military action. I voted for the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. It was intrusive inspections of the Iranian nuclear program by experts from multiple countries under international supervision. And Trump came into office and ripped it up and said we shouldn't have agreed to that. That's what gets us into this place. And now he wants to start a war. The American people do not want another war. He also said he would end all wars on day one. Do you remember that? And so, no.
Okay, we're going to go, this microphone's going to go away, but we're going to have some questions from the audience. Just shout, raise your hand, I'll call on you, and then you can shout it out. Okay. Go ahead.
Senator, first of all, thank you for your service, but looking ahead, 20 years from now, pessimistically and optimistically, what will these young people have learned about this era? And what will it do to our democracy?
I had this lovely opportunity to speak with some of these young people before we gathered here, and one of the things we talked about in a moment like this, when you see some overreaches, unconstitutional actions on behalf of an administration, illegal actions, unwise actions, harmful actions, what are the checks and balances in a healthy democracy, and what are the checks and balances right now? Right now, there's Republican control of the presidency, the Senate, and the House. Had there been one House, say the House of Representatives had been in Democratic control, that H.R. 1 that we were talking about and its injurious impact on rural health and health generally would not have passed, because the House passes things on a simple majority. There would have been an effective congressional check and balance. But you have the courts, you have the Congress, you have the states and localities, and you have the people. And at various times, I have seen each of those rise to the occasion. It wasn't pretty, but democracies are messy, as we know, right? I hope we will look at this moment where some of our democratic institutions appear to be under threat and figure out how we make them stronger, how we make checks and balances stronger in the future. Of course, a lot of folks are worried about the conduct of elections themselves, and I think that will be one of our really important lessons moving forward. Did we protect free and fair elections? I know that's something that some on one part of the ideological spectrum will hear differently than the other, but have we preserved fair and free elections in America? Have we preserved local control of free and fair elections? The president just recently on a podcast said, I want to nationalize elections in many, many states. He didn't say everywhere, it's in many, many states. We could probably build that list together as an exercise in this room. And then he said many, many states, and I think he said 15. Okay? That's one thing we need to be very vigilant about in the present, but also analyze 5 years hence, 10 years hence, 20 years hence. Did we rise to that occasion? And how do we make sure that it's never under threat again?
So, Senator Johnson, with whom you agree on almost everything.
You love Wisconsin cheese.
Yeah. he disagreed with the president on that. And I think, and then we had Senator Honeydew here last week, and he disagreed with that as well. So, does that make you feel better?
Words are important, so are actions.
Okay, so is the SAVE Act, is that going to pass the Senate?
I believe it will fail in the Senate because under current Senate rules, it requires 60 votes to pass. There are 50 senators who have indicated support. That would leave them with 10. And I don't see any chance, especially the fact that they would need 7 Democrats, I don't see any chance of that happening. So the only possibility would be if Senator Thune would agree to end the filibuster. He's resisted pressure to do that very recently, and at this point I see no reason why he would change course. He'll be under a lot of pressure from this president to do so. But at this point, I think that we will be able to defeat the act that one of my colleagues describes as Jim Crow 2.1 or 2.0. I guess one. Not a computer.
No, I don't know. Okay, so
Not one of my Senate colleagues.
Oh, okay. Right here. Shout it out.
All right. Tammy, John Rublin with A-Beta, Wisconsin. We represent 520,000 motorcyclists in Wisconsin, and we also partner with the MRF in Washington, D.C. on motorcyclist issues, that are concerning to us. I'm asking if you're going to support the transportation bill. There's a lot of issues in there that are addressed for motorcycles in there, as far as autonomous vehicles, making sure that we're seeing on the road the definition of a motorcycle, not that they take a three-wheel car to call it a motorcycle, and being able to repair our older motorcycles. Is this something you'd be able to support?
So, in the Senate, I sit on the Senate Commerce, Science, Transportation Committee, which will have a pretty significant role in the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act, which is kind of reaching its deadline. There are lots of aspects to it. I hope when it is in final form that I will be able to support it. It's something that usually gets a lot of bipartisan support, but I will certainly, there's so many new advancements that I want to make sure that I fully understand that aren't done yet in terms of the writing of that bill. I think about the prior debates we've had on autonomous vehicles, and there's still, especially with all the discussions about AI right now, there's still a lot of anxiety, both in the general public, but also to a certain extent in the Congress, of how far we go and whether that will make our roads safer or not. But I appreciate your advocacy in Abate. That has been a really strong voice for the particular and unique perspective of motorcycle drivers. And it's opened my eyes to many things that I wouldn't have previously thought of, especially discrimination in insurance.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go back there.
So let's build on the AI theme.
Great.
We've seen how AI has impacted certainly manufacturing. But what do you think is Congress's responsibility for providing some guardrails? And then part B is, where do you see Wisconsin positioned to take advantage of AI?
So I was much more optimistic last session about some very common sense, straightforward guardrails on AI than I am this session. And let me tell you why. I don't think anybody in Congress was talking about AI before ChatGPT came online. We were, artificial intelligence, what's that? And all of a sudden it became something that people were using and going, wow, this is a remarkable advancement, because it was accessible to everyone. And all of a sudden what's its meaning? And we had a bipartisan group of 4 senators, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, who thought it very important to do basically artificial intelligence 101 for the Senate. And we had a series of briefings that were exceptional. I mean, at one point I remember walking into the room and seeing the head of NVIDIA, the head of, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, all in a panel in front of us. No press allowed. It was recorded, but just to sort of get their perspective of where this has come, where it's going, what the threats are, what the opportunities are. And so with all of my colleagues at that point really invested in understanding what it was. I mean, I had never heard the phrase large language model before we had an MIT professor come and tell us about what it was, right? And I thought we would have a really great opportunity at that moment where, on a bipartisan basis, we had gotten ourselves sort of up to speed for senators who have to be generalists as well as, nuts, to enact some laws. And I thought perhaps the most important, and I thought prior to the 24 elections, that there would be a mutual interest across the party aisle of labeling artificial intelligence produced images and video, because people were scared to death about ads being run me saying something that I didn't actually say, right? And despite that shared interest, it didn't develop. I was really interested in just how do you label artificially and AI-produced material so that somebody knows that that's what they're consuming rather than not knowing. It's been frustrating to see that we didn't move forward, but I still think we have a number of folks with the adequate background and background information about AI to evaluate certain bills that are before us. The disappointment now, it seems to have faded from attention because there are other things that have the flooding of the zone, has grabbed people's attention. And also, I think the legacy of the failure to do anything about algorithms prior to that. They're not unrelated. The fact that we couldn't put some guardrails around big tech on harmful algorithms is to me a big disappointment. And not that I'm giving up and we won't work on that in the future, but it's really complicated stuff. And I also fret about whether our regulatory agencies have the expertise in-house to do that. If you want a Federal Trade Commission that understands algorithms, you need to hire people from big tech, but the FTC doesn't pay as much as Google might, right? So those are some of the complexities there. In Wisconsin, we have a lot of interest from some of the AI leading firms in having a footprint here. Some already have a footprint here, have invested in Titletown Tech or smaller outposts here in Madison. They are interested in developing data centers. And so that would be an area where Wisconsin could play a role. We also have local opposition to data centers that we're going to have to work through with regard to energy use, energy prices, water use, water prices. But those things are things that communities can work through. We also have some real expertise at our universities. I think of quantum computing expertise at UW-Madison and some of the ways in which we've been on the cutting edge. Supercomputing at HPE used to be Cray in Chippewa Valley. So we have a lot of assets here in the state that would put us in a great place to be a leader on AI. But it's sort of at the very early stages, and we're going to have to see how those progress and how there's synergy among all of the assets that I just described.
All right, thanks, Buckley. Good question. Back here.
Yep.
Hi, Senator Baldwin. We know with a lot of the groundbreaking research being done here at the university about Alzheimer's and other dementias, that early prevention is key to treatment. And we're just curious kind of what Congress is working on to help support and expand early detection, knowing that the population of Wisconsin is aging much faster proportionally than the younger generations.
So the major investments are actually in that appropriations bill that I described earlier. And sort of most of it would come through funding from the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. Most of the Alzheimer's research being done on the UW-Madison campus is funded by NIH grants. Not all, but most. There are also private advocacy groups for Alzheimer's that fund, raise money and fund research, and also provide a strong role in public information, dissemination of information, and prevention discussions. But I believe that the major investment that will change outcomes will be that NIH investment. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention could play a preventative role, but really it needs to be guided by evidence-based science. And so that's why I'm so proud that after, this president came in and ripped away grants of research that was, mid-project. I had a witness from the UW-Madison who was an Alzheimer's researcher come to Washington, D.C. to talk about the harmful effect when you just stop research, midstream. And we were able to restore and actually increase that funding for this fiscal year. And I do believe the more ideas that research ideas that we're able to fund, the better our chances that one of those, or two of those, or three of those are going to hold the key to treatments, cures, effective prevention, early intervention. And so I want to keep it going.
Okay, I want to, sorry, we're running out of time here, so I'm just going to close it out and keep your schedule on time too, because we always promise our guests we'll get you out of here at 1 o'clock. Okay, so the third CD, you've endorsed and are backing a candidate there in a primary, Rebecca Cook, against Congressman Van Orden, right? So why are you affecting, why are you entering, I guess, involving yourself in a primary in the third CD?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about policy today. We've talked about HR 1 in particular. Derek Van Orden, the incumbent congressman, voted for that. And it's going to do incredible damage, including disproportionately harm in that part of our state. The current House of Representatives has 218 Republicans, 214 Democrats, and there's 3 open seats. That there'll be special elections. That is a very closely divided House of Representatives. If it had been in Democratic control last year, there would not have been all the damage done by that bill. By the way, in order to get huge tax breaks that disproportionately help billionaires and millionaires and profitable corporations. So that's what that bill did, as it was taking away Medicaid and taking away food share. Wisconsin has an opportunity to change that. Wisconsin has an opportunity to flip that seat, very closely divided. So I was proud to endorse somebody who is going to protect rural health care. It's going to protect farmers and is going to be a strong leader.
Okay, so now there is a primary there. So now I'm going to say, are you going to get involved in the Democratic primary for governor?
I do not intend to.
Oh, come on, you can tell us, just between us.
I think that, look, in the 3rd congressional district, Rebecca Young has, Rebecca Young, listen to me. Dear reflection, she was a colleague of mine in Youth.
We do Becky Young, right.
Rebecca Cook has run before, came close. She actually outperformed me in the 3rd congressional district in the 2024 election, and has proven she can put together the campaign and resources that will be needed to face off against Derek Van Orden. We have in the Democratic primary for governor 7 really talented candidates. I look and I say, how extraordinary. They're very early on in their campaign. That's an early August or mid-August primary. I want to see them hone their skills. I want to see them develop their platforms. I want to see them put together campaigns that show me they're capable of winning after the primary. I don't expect that I'll get involved, before the primary. And, you know, in contrast, the Republican field, the presumptive winner is somebody who voted for that big ugly bill, somebody who has done harm to rural health care, somebody who has done harm to a large part of northern Wisconsin. And so I think the primary contest is going to be healthy for the Democratic side, and I think we're going to be poised to win.
All right, well, there you have it. All right, so that brings us to a close. I want to thank our sponsors, HBS Wisconsin, American Family Insurance, Xcel Energy, Walmart, WC Energy Group, and the Wisconsin Hospital Association. Thanks to our special guests, whom I named before. Thanks to the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin and their chiefs, of course. And we'll have Governor Evers here next week. So I want to now thank you for taking the time, and thanks to all of you for attending. And we'll see you next week.